My name is Dr. Mike Stanton. I'm an assistant professor at Cal State University out here in the Bay Area, and a clinical psychologist as well. And I'm a member of the board here at the Duke Alumni Association. And welcome to this offering from the NorCal region of the Duke Alumni Association. And this was created by and for its Women's Forums members by Marion Sprague. And it's also, this event is co-sponsored by DBA, the Duke Black Alumni, which is headed by Sanders Adu and Tadina Simpson. I wanted to thank all of the rest of the country for joining us in this timely and important conversation. I wanted to remind people to make sure that you mute yourselves, and and also to hide your cameras as well, since we're going to mostly be chatting here. And the best way to communicate with the speaker is through the chat function, which is going to form the basis of the conversation portion of the evening. So if you have a question for Julie, by the way, we're incredibly excited to have Julie Lythcott-Haims here with us today, and she'll be introduced in a moment here. But if you have a question for her, then please use the chat function and send that to Crystal, and who's one of the hosts tonight. And Crystal will relay that question to Julie. Be aware that Crystal will see the names of people submitting questions. And separately, be mindful that this event is being recorded. Another reason why you might want to keep your cameras off and keep your microphones muted. It will be available on Duke Alumni's Lifelong Learning channel on YouTube. And the link to that and to purchase a book will be in an email tomorrow. And you'll also be able to get a link to purchase the book in the chat a little bit later as well today. Well, what I'd like to do now is to introduce Crystal Lynn Brown. Crystal Lynn Brown is Duke class of 02 undergrad. She is currently Senior Director of Business Affairs and Policy for Trust at Airbnb. I'm sure you're very familiar with the company name. And the Airbnb Trust team is a global team responsible for developing the products and policies, including the identity and reputation work, online and offline safety and fraud prevention, and global enforcement partnerships to ensure that Airbnb is one of the most trusted companies in the world. Crystal also heads the company's anti-discrimination strategy, safety and cleaning program for Airbnb experiences, and she manages the execution of company-wide public safety commitments. Crystal spent 8 years in leadership roles at the White House and the US Department of Justice, the DOJ, running cross-organization initiatives, advising and counseling top senior advisors, and handling operations and logistics for the federal government. At the White House, she advised the Office of Management and Budget on a $5 billion 10-year criminal justice budget proposal included in the fiscal year 17 budget, regulations to expand student loan forgiveness options, and interagency clearance of executive orders. So a lot. She was very busy at the Department of Justice, working with the White House and the Department of Justice. As a senior director in the White House Office of Cabinet Affairs, Crystal helped lead President Obama's My Brother's Keeper initiative, aimed at improving the lives of all youth, particularly boys and young men of color. And at DOJ, where she was a top advisor for the Deputy Attorney General, Crystal managed its plan to streamline IT costs, the Smart on Crime initiative to reduce nonviolent prison population, and the DOJ's Intellectual Property Task Force. She also advised the leadership on top antitrust and environmental litigation and crises. And with that, I'd like to introduce Crystal Lynn Brown. Thank you so much for attending today. I'm really looking forward to the talk with Julie Lythcott-Haims.
Thank you, Mike, so much for that introduction, and thank you all for joining us today. I have the honor and privilege of introducing our speaker for the evening, Julie Lythcott-Haims. According to her bio, Julie is a partner, a mother, including being a Duke mom. I'm adding that part in, as her daughter Avery is a sophomore, as you can see from her hat as well. She is a daughter. She is a former corporate lawyer and Stanford dean. But her bio also describes her as a writer, a speaker, and a human. And in her memoir, Real American, you really get to know the human side of Julie as she shares her honest and raw experience being Black and biracial in white spaces. And it was even more honest and raw experience for me because I was listening to an audiobook, so I heard the emotion in her voice as she talked about the experiences that she's lived through. As a Black woman in white spaces, I understand all too well the challenges that Julie talks about in her book. To name just a few, dealing with microaggressions and being second guessed in the private sector and the public sector, as well as in schooling. Wondering, why are you being treated a particular way? Is it because of something that I'm doing? Is it because of prejudice? And what can I do to defend myself? You know, another example of things that Julie talks about in her book is how being able to express yourself as a person of color without being labeled different stereotypes, such as being angry, an angry Black person, an angry person of color, being overly sensitive, and being able to push through that. And she talks about coaching and other things that helped her with that, which is something that I know that I relate to, and a lot of other people of color and Black people in white spaces relate to. And then another thing she talks about is her hair and her journey with her hair. And you can see today I have my curly natural hair, but I go back and forth between this and straightening my hair. But she talks about how she doesn't really wear her natural hair until joining academia. And part of that for her, but for a lot of, for me and for other folks, that also has to do with kind of the perception of what people may think of you based on your hair. And also the idea that a lot of people in some ways want to touch it as well. And Julie talks about that. And I know that I have had that experience and others. So these are just some snippets from Julie's book that I could relate to. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more today as she describes more of her experiences for the talk. Before I turn things over to Julie, I do want to share that we had a short intro conversation, and I wish that it could have gone longer, but it was good to get to know her a little bit before today's presentation. From that, I could tell that she was personable, understanding, and really compassionate about this work. And as I said, our conversation left me wanting more, and I'm sure you all are going to feel that way after her presentation today. So without further delay, I'm going to hand things over to Julie, and then we'll come back and do Q&A after her presentation.
Crystal, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I have the pleasure and honor of getting to speak in various venues by Zoom, and it's rare when somebody kind of goes off the scripted bio and actually says something personal, and I really appreciate it. It really warms up the event for me and just makes me feel that much more connected to you and to this conversation. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Marion Sprague, thank you so much for inviting me, for the notion that this might be a great conversation to have with the Duke community. I want to thank Duke NorCal women. I want to thank Duke Black alumni. It was amazing to hear that this event that was going to be local to Northern California and maybe Duke Black folks was now going to be sort of shared with all of Duke. I am newly a member of the Duke community. I'm a graduate of other brand name schools, but today I am proudly sporting my Duke mom hat, which I'll confess to you, I've never worn before because I hate hats. My father-in-law sent it to me because he's now a proud Duke grandpa, so he bought us all Duke stuff. And while I tend not to wear the hat because it just messes with my hair, what I am constantly wearing is my Duke t-shirt. In fact, I own 2 of them because I like to wear it so often. So it's great to be with you. My daughter is a sophomore. Her name is Avery. She's there right now in Durham, living off campus, doing her best to just lean into the school she loves. Despite it being a pandemic, she's decided to live off campus so that she has some control over where she lives. And no matter what happens with campus housing, my daughter is determined to remain enrolled full-time at this university she loves, and we're so proud that she's a member of. So I'm delighted to be here. It's extra special for me to be considered a member of the Duke community because my daughter is a student. So here's how this is going to go. In my remaining 27 minutes, I'm going to give you a little overview on me, a little bit on our present moment around race, a little bit on how we got here to this present moment, and then what are we going to do about it? And then we'll segue to your questions. But first, I want to say two things. Number one, I am aware that as of now, we have 409 people on this call. Just looking at some of the faces that have shared themselves, I can see this is a richly diverse group of people, which is wonderful. I want anyone who is Black or brown to know that I see you. I may be talking about things tonight that are triggering for you, that bring up stuff for you that you may have processed, you may not have processed. And I want you to know that I wrote this memoir, Real American, for all of us. And so I hope you will feel that I am here with you, near you tonight as we talk about these things. That has been an incredibly difficult few months for those of us who have not had the luxury of ignoring systemic racism in America. For those of you who have been marginalized in this country for reasons other than your nationality and skin color, I see you as well. My memoir is very much about what it's like to be considered the other in a country that says it's a place for everybody. And so you may find that in my stories, even though you have no identity characteristics that are similar to mine, you nevertheless are feeling, hey, that's something I've been through, and I hope that that's a positive experience for you, that you feel maybe less alone in the fact that your story may resonate with mine. And for those of you who have no personal connection whatsoever to what I have to say, please know that I wasn't speaking about you. If I say something about white people, I'm not talking about you, right? I don't know who you are. Please don't take it personally that Julie said this about me. That's not what I'm doing. But I do invite you, I invite everybody, in fact, on this call tonight to be curious about what comes up for you as I share whatever I'm going to share. The body tells us that we're having a reaction to something before the mind can even label it as whatever the reaction is. Okay, there may be times when I share a story that you just get a little jolt of something in your body. It may be, I know for me, when I feel worried or concerned, my voice, which is already deep, gets even deeper. And I know now that that's a little clue from my body, like, hey, we're not feeling okay. I'm not trying to say you're not going to feel okay during my talk. Don't worry. It's not a terrible talk. But I'm inviting you to be curious about what comes up. You know, your knee might start jiggling. Your hands might get a little clammy. Your mouth might go a little dry. You might feel your heart rate quicken. And all of these are clues from your body that, hey, I'm having a reaction to this. And that's valid. Okay, I want you to be curious. What comes up? What's coming up? Be curious as to, hey, what's that triggering in me? Maybe jot a note down. Maybe it'll become a question that you'll ask us tonight, or that you'll interrogate further in your own mind tomorrow and through the rest of the week and out into your conversations with loved ones and colleagues, etc. For all of us, let's just be curious. This is hard stuff, and how you feel in response to what's shared matters, and actually is an important clue as to what matters to you and what you might do with that. It's evening here in Northern California. It's now, about 10 of 6. I've got a jug of water here. If you are at home and you're in a time zone where it's appropriate for you to be having an evening drink you might enjoy, please, we're trying to have a conversation that supports you and nourishes you. So I hope you're in a place where you can relax, where you can just have some quiet, undisturbed, thoughtful time. Get that tea, get that beverage, whatever it is. Let's lean into, just having a conversation where we feel supported and nourished. Okay, so who am I? I'm a Black and biracial woman. I'm 52 years old. I was born to a Black daddy and a white mother. My father would have been 102 this year had he not died at age 77 of prostate cancer. My father was a doctor in this country. His field was public health. My Black grandfather, my daddy's daddy, was one of the first Black doctors in America. Both were educated at Boston University Medical School way, way back in the day. My father was raised in the Jim Crow South, and would go on to become Assistant Surgeon General of the United States under President Carter one day. So my father is this very highly educated Black man, and his daddy was quite anomalous in that identity. Lived in Tulsa, moved there the year after the massacre of the Greenwood community in 1921, for those of you who know that story. So my Black father meets this white woman, my mother, in Ghana. She's from England. She's teaching in Ghana. She's in her 20s. He's in his 40s. They meet at an expat party for British and Americans. They fall in love and were together from that day until he died in 1995. So my immigrant parent is a white person. And I make that point deliberately because particularly now the narrative in our country is that immigrants are brown people from you know what countries. And I'm here to say that I'm the anchor baby of a white lady from England, okay? My Black father made me a seventh generation American through my great grandma Sylvie, who was a slave in Charleston in the late 1700s. That's who I'm from. Two highly educated people. My dad's an MD. My mother's got a PhD in science education. We were middle class when I was growing up. My father wanted to move us to the places his position would permit him to inhabit. I mean, the nice house, the right town. My mother would be the one to visit. We moved a lot in response to my dad's jobs. He was in academic medicine in the government. And so we moved from West Africa to New York, to Wisconsin, to Northern Virginia, back to Wisconsin. My mother would always meet with the realtor and look at the houses in the new communities. And then my father would show up at the closing and people's mouths would fall open because he's this tall, dark, handsome Black man. And they didn't know that they were selling their house to a Black man. And my father didn't want their racism to stand in the way of where he would live. My mother would also remove all of the photos of our family and our African art whenever she put our house on the market for sale in preparation for a move. That was how they did it. It was how they moved through America without letting the racism in local communities impede their forward progress. I'm from those people. I'm from people who got married at a time when it was illegal in 14 states for them to be married. I come from people who broke the rules. I am born of their transgression, and I'm delighted that they were transgressive because I appreciate this life. In addition to the privileges I've mentioned, my highly educated parents, who then were able to offer me a great education, undergrad, Stanford, Harvard Law School. I have this light skin, which is also quite a privilege in this country, relatively speaking. I've got this white adjacency through my white mother. I married a white Jewish guy, so I also have a lot of privilege attached to him and his identity. I've got this voice I've been praised for all my life, as if people think a person of my hue shouldn't be able to speak like this. And I became upper middle class with my education and my career choices and so on. And I'm noting all of this because I have written a memoir about being Black and biracial in white spaces and dealing with racism and microaggressions. But this is not a memoir about suffering, because I am clear that I am very privileged. My life has been that crystal stair. To paraphrase Langston Hughes's poem, "My life ain't been no crystal stair." It says in the poem, my life has been, relative to that of most people in Black America, my life has kind of been a crystal stair. And yet I wrote a memoir on what it's been like to be Black and brown and deal with racism, because I've learned racism is agnostic to class and to the degrees you have and to who your daddy is. And in fact, racism often gets angry at you for being too uppity if you start to succeed and start to ascend to these places of power and opportunity that racists would like to not see Black people inhabit. So I think that's sort of the summary of my identity and what made me decide to write a book about my experiences. So the arc of my memoir is if you teach or or really delve into, you know, the sort of the craft of writing, you know that a good novel or memoir takes you on a journey. There's an arc from here to here. My memoir is more like a dip into a pit that I come up and out of. So I start in the innocence of childhood. I get to this place of self-loathing, and then I come out of it to this place of self-love where I am delighted to be now. I was an innocent child until I was about 4. And about 4 years old is when I learned something's wrong with daddy and something might be wrong with me. And I could tell that based on the looks on the faces of strangers when I would be out walking down the street with daddy. Daddy was busy. He traveled all the time. I adored him. He called me old sport. He'd say, come on, old sport, let's go to the hardware store. And I'd be 4 and just delighted to have my daddy's attention. And we'd go together and we'd walk down the street, and some strangers stared at him with eyes that steamed like a cauldron, as if they could brand him like an animal with their focus if he dared to look them in the eye. And those looks scared me, and those looks were meant to scare me. And I couldn't have called it racism when I was 4. Now I call it the white racist sneer, that look of hatred with that upper lip that sort of just jiggles a little bit like a dog that's about to growl. I've seen that look too many times in my life. I began to notice it when I was 4. And it was clear because I had a white parent, I could almost A/B test, you know, like, this is how the world sees daddy. This is how the world sees mommy. Mommy didn't get those looks. So I learned something's wrong with daddy. Maybe something's wrong with me. And I began to plunge from this place of innocence into self-loathing slowly. So when I had that experience as a 4-year-old in New York, in Rockland County. For those of you who know New York, across the Hudson from Manhattan is where we live. My dad had been on the faculty at Columbia. He then moved to the faculty of UW-Madison. And so we moved to Madison, and that's where I spent 2nd and 3rd grade. And then we moved to Northern Virginia, Fairfax County. My father was a Carter appointee, and I began 5th grade there. And most of my classmates were white. And here's a story from then as I continue my descent into self-loathing. So I'm in 5th grade, and one of my best friends gets put into gifted and talented. And I know she's smart, but I know she's not smarter than me. You know how we do. And so I went home and I told my mom, Susie got put. Oh my gosh, Susie is a Duke alum. I'm just remembering. It's perfect. Susie, my amazing, brilliant friend. I said to my mom, we're in 5th grade, Mom, Susie got put into gifted and talented, but not me. She gets to do cool projects and puzzles. How come I don't? And my mother said, that doesn't sound right. You know, let me go to the school. So she goes to see my teacher, Mr. Pulansky, but Pulansky is not persuaded. So my mother takes it up with the principal, this time insisting that I be tested, using her privilege and knowledge as an educator, I'm sure, to kind of figure out how to kind of make this system respond to her child. So they bring in someone from the district and they give me an IQ test and they mail the results to our house. And I'm looking around for a piece of paper. We can use props now that we're on Zoom. So my mother opens this letter up. You know, it comes in the mail, and she opens it up. She doesn't know I'm watching. She reads the results and she kind of squirrels the letter away in a drawer. Well, I was put in the gifted group soon after. And shortly after that, Mr. Pulansky stood up at the front of our 5th grade classroom, and this is what he said. He goes, apparently all it takes to be gifted is for your parent to meet with the principal. I had peeked at the letter from the district. It said I was 99th percentile on whatever test they gave me. It also listed my IQ. And as my teacher stood smug, so I knew I belonged in this gifted class, gifted situation. As my teacher stood smug at the front of our 5th grade classroom, it was the first time in my young life I uttered a very silent F you in my head. I didn't say that out loud, but I'm just telling you, as a 10-year-old, I knew what he was up to. I knew that he was trying to demean me. I was trying not to let him, but over time, experiences like that added up. It took me to this place of self-loathing. As some of you are old enough to recall, Ronald Reagan beat President Carter. My father lost his job as Assistant Surgeon General of the United States. We leave Northern Virginia. We move to Middleton, Wisconsin now. This is a suburb of Madison, a farming community combined with kind of suburban people, all white. I'm now in high school, 1,200 white kids. The diversity in that body of 1,200 were 2 Jewish families, us, And then the diversity within the non-Jewish white folks were Lutheran, Catholic, Mormon, okay? So all white high school, 1,200 kids. I'm now a sophomore, I'm 15 years old. I go over to my best friend's house. She was in her basement rec room watching a movie on the VCR. I think all of you are old enough to know what that is. If you're not, it's like Netflix. And she loved these black and white movies about the South before the Civil War. And she just liked the sort of old classic Hollywood black and white movies, really about anything. And so I go downstairs, I'm like, hey, she's like, hey, she smiles and then turns her gaze back to the TV. She's watching Gone with the Wind. And she goes, wouldn't it have been great to have lived back then? And I say, no. And she says, why not? And I say, because I would have been a slave. And she says, oh, but I mean, if you weren't black. And I say, but I am black. And she says, I don't think of you as black. I think of you as normal. My junior year, Jesse Jackson is running for the Democratic nomination for president. There's something about the fact that this black man is running that is lifting my spirits a little. It's like he's being taken seriously. I mean, everybody's saying he can't win. He could never win. You understand, he could never win. Yes, but he was still being taken seriously in a way that I felt was sort of like a rising tide that could lift all boats. I felt better. I felt more valid, more valued by the fact that Jesse Jackson was showing up and doing well, and people were tuning into his ideas and the potential of his leadership. We caucused in Wisconsin, and I was 16, and I showed up to caucus. You could caucus as a 16-year-old, and I stood in a room with the 5 other people that were supporting Jesse Jackson, and I'll never forget, it was my first foray into participatory democracy. I just loved it. I would one day be an Obama delegate elected from my region of Silicon Valley, but that was the beginning for me at age 16, just standing up, daring to just speak about what you care about. And later that year, or maybe probably still that spring, my junior year English teacher had us write a persuasive essay. So I wrote my essay on why Jesse Jackson's candidacy mattered to someone like me, really trying to put on the page why psychologically, and maybe Mike, you can appreciate this given your work, why it mattered to me that this guy was running, why it was making a difference in my life, lifting me. And my teacher had decided my paper was so terrible I had to rewrite it. He didn't understand it, he said. And then I had to stand up and give it in front of everybody in my class, as we all did. And my classmates just stared at me as if not only had I failed to write a persuasive paper about Jesse Jackson running for president, but that may be the only thing I had persuaded them of, which was that I had not written about anything important at all. Senior year, I had been elected president of the student body. I was popular, I was liked, I was doing exceptionally well academically. I was on the pom-pom squad. My daughter, Avery, was one of the dancing devils last year for Duke. So, she kind of has that in her blood. So I'm on the pom-pom squad. I did not dance for my college, but my daughter did. Go Duke. I lost my train of thought because I'm so excited about Duke. Okay, back to me. So I'm on the pom-pom squad in high school. I'm a singer in the choir. My daughter's part of Duke Rhythm and Blue. I'm just loving who my daughter is connected to me in ways that are really meaningful to me. Okay, so I'm back to me. I'm singing, I'm pom-pom, I'm the student body president. I'm young for my class, always have been, started kindergarten at age 4. So now I'm turning 17 in November of my senior year. And I feel beautiful. I feel strong. I feel smart. I've got a boyfriend. I'm headed to college. I'm doing well. I dress the part. I put on a beautiful dress. Even though it's winter in Wisconsin, I put on heels. I press my hair. As Crystal said, I used to press my hair. You see, I've got this curly, this is my natural, but I would straighten it straight so that it would feather, maybe like my white friend's hair would feather, but it never did, of course, but I tried. I just pressed it straight, tied it back, maybe had a little chignon at the back of my neck, or maybe I let it hang down in a smooth ponytail. And I'm just feeling beautiful. I'm feeling like it's my birthday. I'm student body president. I know my best friend's going to have made me a birthday locker sign. And we did this for each other. A lot of girls did this in my school, and maybe they still do. It was one of those 5-foot tall lockers. So she would tape paper together, one long piece of, 5 pieces of paper taped together with images cut out of magazines and words cut out of magazines. And she might draw on it with marker. And sure enough, I'm walking toward my locker and I can hear my heels clicking on the floor. I'm kind of feeling like, here I go. I can almost hear the soundtrack, it's your birthday. And I can see she's taped ribbons to the locker sign. So I get there and she's there and I hug her and I thank her and I'm reading the sign. It's so beautiful. And just people are saying happy birthday and I'm saying thanks and it's great. And I take my backpack, I put it in the locker, I grab a couple of books, I walk to my first class and I kind of feel like I own the place. I have to say, I just was at that pinnacle place in my high school at that point and was about to be knocked down to size. So about 10:30 in the morning, I'm estimating somebody came along and wrote NIGER on my birthday sign 3 times in black marker. Now notice there was 1 G, only used 1 G. This is how ignorant this person was. I knew that they had spelled the African country Niger. I don't think this person knew that then and probably doesn't know it now. Maybe I'm being too harsh. But I knew what it meant. Even with 1 G, I knew I was meant to see that I was the N-word of my town, of my school. And I knew I was. And I was so ashamed that it happened that I didn't tell anybody. I was so ashamed to be the N-word of my town. I didn't tell a school. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell my best friend. I didn't tell my boyfriend. I just went and got a black magic marker and made neat black lines, basically, thick black marker, drew black lines over the black word that was so offensive 3 times and left the sign up. I didn't want it to, how could I take it down? Everybody would know, my best friend would know what happened to your sign. I didn't want anyone to know. So I managed to cover it up. And then I took the sign home and I cut the bad words out of the sign. And then I squished the sign accordion style into my scrapbook where it resides to this day, now in my garage here in Palo Alto. I didn't tell anybody until I was 44 and was writing poetry in an MFA program that would lead to my becoming an author. But it lodged itself inside of me and it metastasized. I knew I would spend really the rest of my life trying to never be called the N-word again. A classmate had applied to Stanford and had not gotten in. I had applied to Stanford and had gotten in. So it's April of my senior year. We're in our math class, last period of the day, the bell rings. My friend's named Harris and I just saw your note, Miriam. Yeah. Okay. I had me starting at 5:42, so I'm going to take until whatever that is, 12 after, I guess. Okay. Sorry about that. It was a little inside baseball. So my friend's dad walks into our math class and he says, so Julie, you got into Stanford? And I say, yes. I'm wondering, why is my friend's dad in our class? It was the 80s before parents always showed up in school, which is the subject of my other book, How to Raise an Adult on the Harm of Helicopter Parenting. So he says, you got into Stanford? And I said, yes. And he said, do you think it's fair that you got into Stanford when Harris's SAT scores were higher than yours? And Harris wasn't the student body president, and our grades were roughly the same. But somehow this man was intimating I had stolen his kid's spot at Stanford with my blackness, which I began to believe. So I began to struggle at Stanford. I began to do very badly. I began to feel ashamed that I was doing badly. I began to feel like, okay, I'm not supposed to succeed. Harris's father was right. People like me don't belong at a place like Stanford. So I just shrank and hid, didn't go to tutoring, didn't go to academic advising, didn't talk to the professor, didn't do all the things I would tell my students they should do once I became the dean of freshmen and undergraduate advising at Stanford a generation later. I got a 2.0 fall quarter, and I was just so ashamed. My parents finally had the guts to ask me how it had gone in in February, they called me and they said, how'd it go fall quarter? And I cried and they said, we love you. And why don't you go to that nice advising office we heard so much about in orientation? So I went to the advising office and they asked me about what I was taking and my habits as a student. And they said, hey kid, you've got what it takes intellectually, but your study skills need a lot of work. Let's teach you better techniques to build a stronger scaffolding around this intellect so that you can be successful in the ways you want to be. And oh, hey, why don't you start taking classes you love instead of classes you feel you have to take? Because when you love the classes, you're motivated to go the extra mile and really push through and slog through. So that's how I found myself in a civil rights and civil liberties class in the spring. And it's a class of 200 people. And this would be the reason I would go to law school one day, this class. And the professor asks a really tough question. And I look around and I'm going like this, like, oh, I love this thing he's asking us. I'm so glad he brought this up, right? Because I've done the work. I've done the reading. I've done the extra reading. I've gone to study out to office hours. I've created a study group. Like I am in it. And I look around and none of the 200 other kids are raising their hand. But I don't dare to raise my hand because I'd never raised my hand at Stanford. And I still don't dare to do so because I don't want to be black and wrong. I'm terrified of being black and wrong. But my professor can see that I want to talk. So he goes like this. He kind of looks at me like this. He goes, like, So I start to speak and I'm nervous and my professor goes like this and he's nodding his head at me like this, like, what was he doing? He was saying like, go kid, go. He was saying, I see you. He was showing everybody else in the class that Julie Lythcott knew her stuff. And do you know what every one of my 200 classmates did? They started writing down what I was saying. They were trying to keep up. It was the days before laptops. They had to write by hand and they did. And this was me speaking with a voice, pushing through the brambles out into the clearing. This was my efforts to try to be better than white folks expect a black person can be. And this is a race that I would run and try to win for the next 20 years. So that is my story in a nutshell. Here we are in this moment of Black lives. Many white folks discovered in late May that Black people can be killed slowly or quickly by law enforcement, and those law enforcement will not be held accountable. This was a moment in our country when a lot of white folks became aware that that was possible. As I said at the outset, many of us did not have the luxury of not being aware of those things. We've had to be aware for reasons of our own safety and that of our loved ones. It was encouraging and yet so discouraging simultaneously to discover how many white people were discovering for the first time or caring for the first time that this is happening and is outrageous. It has forced me to ask, why don't they see us as human? Why haven't they ever seen us as human? I think if Tamir Rice, who was 12, who was killed in a park by his house in Cleveland, Ohio in 2014, who would have been 18 and able to vote in this election had he not been killed at 12. I think if Tamir had been Tommy Rice, a white boy, and he was mistaken for being an aggressive man with a gun, when he was shot and the police officer discovered, oh my gosh, this is a child, he would have at least been offered CPR. Tamir Rice wasn't. The police officer saw this is a child, this is a toy, I've shot a child, and didn't try to save his life. If Tamir had been Tommy, I'm sure we would have had police reform in 72 hours. Frankly, if Tamir had been a dog, I think we would have had outrage in this country within 72 hours. But many of you have not heard the name Tamir Rice. It did not hit your news feed. It hit my news feed because I'm raising, in addition to my amazing daughter Avery, I'm raising a son 2 years older who presents to the world as a young Black man. And I'm trying to make this country safer for my son and for everybody's children. So I've had to ask, why don't they see us as human? Why don't they think our anguish is the anguish of humans? And I take myself back to days of slavery when we were sold off as if we were animals, and they ignored our cries as they ripped us out of the arms of our family. They took our children from us. They took our mothers and fathers from us. Professor Heather Andrea Williams at Penn wrote this haunting, gorgeous book, Help Me to Find My People, about ads placed in newspapers in 1865 by freed Black people saying, can you help me find my mother? I last saw her in 1847. Can you help me find my child? You know, we placed ads in newspapers seeking to be reunited, to knit us back together, having been torn asunder. It still happens today. Our cries were ignored for centuries, and they're still ignored today, which is why I can't breathe Eric Garner. I can't breathe George Floyd. Why those pleas for mercy go unheard. It is a disturbing time in our America. White supremacy is on the rise. It has been given permission to be out and proud and unmasked and unhooded. They march in polo shirts and carry tiki torches in the light of day. And it is terrifying if you're somebody who's on the other side, who's in the crosshairs of white supremacy. This is not an easy moment, but it is our moment. We are as much a part of America as they are. And so my questions for you tonight are, do you think you see Black people as fully human? And if so, how do you know? And of course you say, of course, you want to say, yes, of course I see Black people as fully human. We all do, right? Yes, and how do you know that that value is actually showing up in your behavior and choices? Put differently, if someone knocked on the door and asked your children or someone else in your household, does this person see Black people as fully human, you know, equal to whites? What would someone else say about you, and what evidence would they have? That's question one. Do you see Black people as fully human? Let me say Black and brown people as fully human. If so, how do you know? How does it show? And number two, what are you doing to make your world kinder and safer for Black people? Those are my two questions. Crystal, back over to you.
Oh, can you hear me, Julie? I think I'm going. Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, Julie. We've got a lot of comments and questions that have come up in the chat. So why don't we dig right in? I think one question I think relates or reminds me a little bit of the story you were just telling about speaking up at Stanford. And I don't have a name for who provided this question, but I'll just read it out. Part of the reason that I don't broadcast my own accomplishments and those of my family members is that I don't want to feel like I am performing, proving that I belong, no matter how candid and relevant that information would be. Have you had similar thoughts, and how do you address them? And actually it does look, the question came from someone named Talua. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it accurately.
So I'm inferring that that Talua is a woman of color who's asking. I relate to this question, and I'm going to assume that. I got to be honest with you, Talua, I didn't do the work. My journey out of self-loathing to self-love, which is the end of this arc here, and I just ran out of time because I'm so long-winded, I apologize, but I did the work in my 40s with an executive coach to undo all this hate about myself that was now baked into myself. I was trying to never be called the N-word again. I was basically, racism had convinced me to be ashamed of being Black, to fear Black people, and just try to be what white people valued. And when I was able to name those truths to my coach, it was like chasing the bully away. It was like they were gone instantly, that bully that was riding me. But until then, which was, you know, age 40, I'm 52 now, I was the performative Black person. I was trying to show up and prove that I had these accomplishments and that I had done these things. I was trying to be right in every single conversation. I was trying to be Black but smart, Black but accomplished, Black but this and that. And it was wearying. Now I'm in this self-loving place where I can say, I am myself. I am Black. I am light-skinned. I have a white mother. This is who I am. I don't care. I'm not here to prove myself to anybody anymore. And the relief that has come from that has just been just a huge weight out of my spirit. And I think part of it is age and stage. You know, maybe it's sort of this tautology, like I've come to this place of success, so therefore I don't need to, you know, say to prove my accomplishments. I don't know. You know, I think being in your 40s, 50s, you start to not care or not worry or not let your sense of self be constructed of what other people think of you. So that's I relate. I relate very much, and I appreciate the question.
Another question that came in from Susan is oh, sorry, I'll go to Susan next. Robin White, what are the most common microaggressions you've experienced?
The most common microaggressions. Microaggressions are tiny little things, and by definition, we almost don't remember them. We remember the aggregate of them because the weight of them in the aggregate is what drowns us. I call it I'm mixing my metaphors, drowning and weight, but it's like a drainage pipe that just slowly is dripping poison onto your psyche, and that over time distorts your sense of self. I have had white women come up to me in the workplace at Stanford University where I was in an important role. Colleagues come up to me. My hair used to be much bigger. I've lost it in my 50s. It's thin. Some of you can relate to that. But I used to have this like ropey, biracial, coily hair that would come down to my shoulders. And I would get this like, oh my gosh, your hair is just amazing, just touching me in the workplace, doing a video for my alma mater, my former employer, for new employees about what it's like to be an employee at Stanford. And, you know, I tell my story and this and that. And then the producer says, you're just so articulate. And I say, thanks, but really? And she's like, no, I just don't know. I don't know how. It's just somehow you're so articulate. And I'm at this point, I put my hand up and I say, you know, that's really just, you know, that's really not something you should say. And, you know, so that was me sort of not taking it anymore. I don't know how many white people she's praised, you know, for, wow, you talked really well in our video. I was at a party in Palo Alto, a fundraiser for my kids' public school. We have terribly underfunded public schools in California. We have to raise money for them. We have private foundations to support public schools. I'm showing up at one of these events. It's a murder mystery party. I'm serving, I'm like part of the committee that's putting on the party. So there are all these, you know, other parents who are enjoying the party. It's a murder mystery, athletes marooned on an island. And this woman decides she's playing an athlete who's going to be black. So she puts shoe polish all over her body. A white woman dresses up in blackface in Palo Alto in, I think it was 2013. You know, and I just, you know, was the only black person there. There was a Native American person there. I caught his eye. He and I looked at each other. By this point, so many people were drunk. We didn't feel safe. We didn't feel like safe, meaning if we said something, would they laugh at us or would they like do something? Someone was shouting, show us your jive dancing, at this white guy with an Afro wig who was just dancing in a group of drunken white people. And I just thought like, wow, is this how they behave when we're not around? You know, when I was a Stanford student, it was go to the Stanford Shopping Center, which is a very hoity-toity shopping center, and, you know, be followed in the stores. When I looked, you know, I was a kid, right? But I just looked like, this black person probably shouldn't be in my store. That was something I dealt with. And then, you know, a friend at Stanford, her, you know, her mother comes to visit and I get introduced and she's like, oh, what sport do you play, right? As light as I am, she thinks like she's putting the stereotype of the black athlete on me, which is not to say light people can't be athletes, but like she went straight to the stereotype of like, if you are African-American, you must be a recruited athlete. You know, it just, those are some examples.
So this question is from Leslie Seymour. How do white women really help with this movement towards seeing black and white as equal? Some activists ask for us to be allies. Others say that is not valuable, and we are sidestepping the issue by being allies. What do we do, and how do we intersect?
You know, I think, Leslie, the first thing is to ask yourself that question, do I see black people as fully equal? If so, how do I know? How does it show? Are you living near black people? Are you working in a workplace that includes Black people? Do your children go to school in schools that have Black people? If not, ask yourself, what choices am I making such that that is the case? When you're on a bus or on a subway or on a train, or it's open seating on a plane, do you avoid sitting next to Black people? These are the ways in which subtly people are sorting themselves. There are studies that show that white women expect people to step off the sidewalk for them still. Okay, I now have an experiment running. When I'm in big cities like New York, I will be the Black person that does not yield. And I watch white women almost run into me. It's as if they do not know I am there, right? They're so accustomed to the waters parting. Again, not you, I'm not talking about you, but I have had this experience innumerable times. And I think we should all be courteous to one another. And I do not think that anyone of any class or skin color or gender is supposed to step aside for anybody else. Now, Duke is in the South, maybe gender issues, maybe it's different for me in California, but skin color wise, I do not expect anyone to automatically give anybody else the right of way. These are examples of ways, if any of these stories are making you go like, wow, do that work on examining further how those things might be showing up in your life, or what you could do to really kind of advance your own practice. If you are going to be an ally, the very first thing to know is we are accustomed to white folks coming in and taking over. In the wake of George Floyd, people like, okay, we need to do this. We need to change the schools. I said, wait a minute, slow down. Ask yourself, who's already been doing this work? Likely people of color have been trying to draw attention to this police brutality, this achievement gap in the schools, this situation in healthcare. Why don't you try to understand what has already been underway and be humble and respectful and see how you can join it. The wall of white women in Portland who've put their bodies between law enforcement and Black protesters, I think it's amazing. And I watched them change their narrative from we're coming to do this to we are asking the Black Lives Matter people, how can we support your effort? They understand that they have tremendous privilege and power in just showing up, and they want to use it, but they also don't want to presume to know how it's going to be used. And that's the subtlety of being a good ally. I mean, one of the best ways to be an ally is simply in every single conversation, every time you're watching a movie, a television show, seeing an ad on TV, interacting with friends, colleagues, family at Thanksgiving, to have a reel that runs in your head. How does this impact Black people? Okay. And then be willing to say, that's interesting. I have to ask myself, how is it that we let our healthcare system become so ignorant of the quality of life issues affecting Black health? Why is it that our public health and our wellness health prevention programs have not done a better job of seeing how Black existence in this country contributes to higher mortality rates for pregnant moms, for infant babies, for people with COVID? It's kind of bringing a lens, it's putting a new filter. You don't go to the eye doctor and they put a different filter in. They're like, oh, this is clear, this is not clear. Those of you with glasses know what I'm talking about. It's like putting on a lens where you start to be interested in trying to see how the world might be experienced differently by someone who's not you, and then using your privilege, whatever it is, whether it's skin color plus gender plus socioeconomic status, whatever it might be, to be somebody who can speak up and be heard when perhaps some others of us can't.
So Julie, I'm going to pull two kind of somewhat related questions together. One is about corporate America, and the second is really also institutions of higher learning. So from Janet Hill, does Julie think corporate America will pick up the mantle of Black Lives Matter and hire, promote, and retain more Black people? Will they hold managers and executives accountable or for progress in this area? And then a related question was just asking about what curriculums or changes could Duke or other schools like that take to continue this conversation in the classroom? So similar, because it's corporate America and higher education, of what they can do or should do, and if they're going to rise to that occasion.
Thanks, Crystal. Janet, to your question, I'm really buoyed by the velocity around changing corporate America that I've witnessed in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, and frankly, in the wake of Amy Cooper's absolutely atrocious phone call or allegation of a phone call from Central Park. for those of you who don't know, she's the white woman who threatened to call the cops on an African-American man is threatening my life in Central Park. He was just telling her to curb her dog in a bird sanctuary. And there's just been so much velocity since then. Frankly, a lot of corporations are setting measurable goals, just as they have for climate change. So there are corporations that need to hit their climate change and sustainability goals, and they're looking for opportunities to hit that. I've seen, so many corporations starting to shift policies around their board makeup, around, their recruitment practices. You want to find great Black, you think it's a pipeline problem. You're just looking in the wrong pipe in a lot of ways, we're out there and we're eager for opportunity. We want to be hired. But here's something else. Here's where it gets subtle. I'm going to say something that's going to be very controversial. There are a lot of people opposed to affirmative action because they see it as, oh, Black and brown people are given a thumb on the scale, they're given a lift they don't deserve, or a thumb on the scale they don't deserve. I'm here to tell you, if that's your narrative, if that's how you think of affirmative action, undeserved privilege, the original affirmative action is white skin. Because in this country, since the 1600s, white skin has been the way to get what you did not deserve. It has been the way to get the door open for you, to get access for your children and your family members and the opportunity you need, right? Without it being about your brains or your hard work, it's been about your white skin. And maybe it's less so today than it's been, but it's still there in so many respects. Just ask anyone with white skin, would you like to have brown skin for 2 weeks in America? Would you like to try to get a job? Would you like to try to get rent an apartment? Would you like to try to catch a cab? That white skin is this privilege, and you didn't earn that white skin. It just got handed on to you by your ancestors, all right? So when it comes to hiring, here's what happens. We're like, well, we have a candidate. We're interviewing candidates, and we're like, well, this one didn't do very well, but he's Black. So, we tried. You're like, well, they're Black. What can we do? If the white candidate wasn't very good, you're like, oh, what a goofball. Oh, this isn't the right job for him. Oh, he needs some mentoring. But if it's a Black person, it confirms your stereotype that Black people can't be successful to start with. I want you to reimagine the world as if God is a Black man, and as if every single aspect of our human condition is about testing. Can you treat Black people with dignity and kindness and opportunity? Imagine if that was your reframe. Imagine the lens that would be on your eye if that was the way the world really worked, okay? So we have to be willing to say, we're going to treat people as individuals. We're not going to lump people into groups and say, all Black people are this way, and white people are allowed to be treated as individuals, but Black people are lumped into a group. Let me frame it differently. When a shooter shoots up a public school, it's almost always a white male. Nobody says, oh, those white people, those white males, boy, are they trouble. Nobody says that. They say lone wolf, bad actor, lone actor, right? It was him. It wasn't white people. But when a Black person has been said to do something, then it's, oh, them, they, right? Susan Smith was a white woman in South Carolina who murdered her 2 children by strapping them into the car seats. They were a toddler and an infant. She put him in the car seat in the back of the 2 car seats in the back of her car, set her car on a pitch that was going to roll into the reservoir, took the emergency handbrake off, let the car roll, let the children drown, and then told the world she'd been carjacked by a Black man. And South Carolina was on lockdown looking for Black men. And the rest of the South was like, we are on the lookout too, because a white woman like Amy Cooper was trying to do in Central Park knew that all she had to do was say, this happened to me, and everybody would believe her. It's in fiction and it's in our news. It's just what we're trying to undo. So believe it or not, this makes its way into the workplace, these assumptions and presumptions. And we have to hold ourselves accountable to not letting those, the old rules govern our way of being today. When it comes to the curriculum, we do not know our American history. I happen to have been an American history major at Stanford, so I had the luxury of diving deep into our very fraught and at times very wonderful national history. but we don't do a good job of teaching our history. So many Americans don't understand the Holocaust and what actually happened then, less than 100 years ago. The Holocaust is not accurately taught. Slavery is not accurately taught. You know, slavery is relegated to a paragraph that's this big in an American history textbook, even though it is the foundation for how we understand our economy and who matters in this country and who doesn't. So better teaching of American history is where I would start. And also anti-bias training. I mean, there's an amazing book. I'm trying to find it. You're here in my office. This book, Bias, by Jennifer Eberhardt. She's a professor at Stanford in psychology. She won the MacArthur Genius Grant for this work. She talks about how implicit bias is baked into every single one of our minds. Don't feel bad, it's there. America does that to you, but now that you know that, you have to do the work to root this implicit bias toward others who are not like you. You have to get it out of your head and your heart and your psyche. And she explains how you do that. And it's about slowing down your thinking and noticing what comes up for you. Like I've been asking you to notice what comes up in your body as I speak. That's part of my practice toward rooting bias out from in me. And I'm interested in sharing it with others who are interested in learning it. So long-winded answer, I know. Those are my thoughts.
No, and that last question about curriculum was from CJ Palin. Bias, another audiobook I listened to, that was amazing. So +1, adding on, recommending that book for folks to just uncover so many things you don't even really realize that you have in you. One question from Mark: does Julie know why her dad and mom made the decision to not live in more predominantly Black neighborhoods when the family moved around the country?
Mark, my daddy died in 1995. I was 27. He was 77. And I didn't have this consciousness then. I couldn't ask him these questions then. How I wish I had had that opportunity. In choosing to raise me in all white towns, he also said to me when he saw me having crushes on boys in my high school, I remember him saying, and I write this in the book, he said, "Baby, white boys will be your friends, but they'll never date you." And I found myself at 15 wanting to shake him and say, "Daddy, don't I deserve to be loved? Why is that okay? Why did you move me to this all white town?" I could never ask my dad. I've had those conversations with my mother, who's still very much alive and wonderful, now 81.
Why can't we?
And sorry, I just got distracted. Here's what I infer to be my dad's motive. He was raised in Oklahoma during the Jim Crow era. He wanted nobody to stand in his way. He was a doctor. He was doing work that was important and valuable. He wanted to have the house he wanted to have. And I think his idea of success was about those things. He wanted to be in the right community. And in his mind, that did not mean the Black community. I don't think he was prejudiced against Black people any more than any of us on average is growing up in America as Black people. There were very few Black folk in his milieu in that time, in that era, very few Black professionals. And I think so it was a question of living with working class Black folks or middle class Black folks. There were hardly any middle class Black folks. And I think that was the choice that he made. I wish I had been raised in an environment that was diverse. It harmed me. It harmed my psychosocial development to be raised where I was. And I spent decades undoing the harm of being raised that way.
Julie, this question is from Amanda. In my company, we have tried to hire people of color, but often they do not accept the offer because they see that our company is not currently diverse. What can we do to overcome the hurdle of lack of diversity in order to increase diversity?
Amanda, let me tell you how I approach it. This has been coming my way in the wake of George Floyd. I have heard from so many people who are suddenly quite interested in having me on their board, in their organization. And this is what I say. I say, I understand you feel that you now need somebody like me. I am not interested in being the token person in your organization that heretofore has not found it problematic that you lack people like me. It's just not, what's in it for me? You know, I mean, I've had readers of my book say, you need to move to our town. It's all white. We really need you. And I'm signing the book and smiling. And the lady goes, no, really, we need you. We need you to move up here to our lily white town in Marin County, California, across the Golden Gate Bridge. And I want to say, lady, were you listening to me? Did you hear my presentation about how being in all white environments harmed me? I am not here to be in service to you and whatever goals you may now have about the need to learn more or be diverse. So this is our skepticism when a company hires us and we're like, you'll be the first Black person. We need diversity. Don't ever say that. Do not ever say, well, we need more diversity. So none of us wants to be your diversity. We want opportunity. We want the chance to prove ourselves. We want to be in a great working environment where people work hard and are appreciated. You know, that's what everybody wants. Okay. So what I would find appealing by way of an offer is a conversation about, Julie, we are doing the work to become anti-racist. Okay, I'm going to quote here Martha Hackmatt, who's a DEI consultant who's amazing. I met her 2 months ago because she's working with Horace Mann School in the Bronx on their diversity and inclusion efforts. She and I are both speaking with Horace Mann, so she and I met. And Martha says, it's not just enough to believe in anti-racism or to say you are an anti-racist, you have to actively do the work. Okay, so here's how an organization can signal to candidates, we're doing the work. You would say, hey, we have formed a high-level task force to examine our historical issues, to really begin to understand why it is we're not diverse, how we got this way, why it hasn't been a priority for us to fix it until this day. We want you to know that we are starting that work. And we're very interested in talking with you about your thoughts about that. We're interested in sharing the outcomes of our work. This is what they might say to me as somebody they want to have join the board or the organization. If they came to me and said that, I would be interested in learning more. But if all they want to do is add me to a structure that has always been problematic, that is, by this point, almost offensive. Okay, to be the one Black person everybody knows has been to be very busy since George Floyd was murdered. So I think in an employee context, you say, you know, we're setting, you know, we have not done a good job and we know we've got to do much, much better. We need to basically dismantle the existing structure and rebuild. That's the kind of language I would use. We are dismantling and rebuilding. And part of that means we're not just adding diversity here and here. We're saying, we have been deficient in not having people from myriad backgrounds on our team, and we are working over the next X years to be better at that. And we are intentionally recruiting. You should be recruiting. If you're recruiting out of college, you need to be at HBCUs, okay? If you're, right, you've got to go, for example, where the Black people are, okay? Instead of, well, we only recruit here. No, you gotta, if you're trying to get more of us in, you gotta look for us where we are. And then recruit a bunch of people at once and make commitment. Recruit some high level people who can come in and start to build a sense of community and critical mass. You know, we all want, look, the racism isn't gonna stop anytime soon, and the microaggressions. So what we need, if we wanna join a community, is to know there are other people here like me who get it. Okay, too often we hear, did it really happen that way, Julie? Why can't you give her the benefit of the doubt? Why do you always have to make it about race? She didn't mean anything when she touched your hair. You know, I got feedback that I was too emotional and too aggressive, okay? Because sometimes stuff bothered me in the workplace and I said so. I got this stereotypical Black woman feedback, okay? We need to know if we're in a place where there's a critical mass, we can go to the affinity group and say, you're not going to believe what this person just said to me in the TV studio when I was filming this clip. You're not going to believe what so-and-so just did. She had her hands up in my hair. Where our colleagues can say, like, I'm sorry that happened to you, that happened to me, or, you know, this is how I deal with it. We can sort of be supported and kind of someone extends their hand and pulls us back up to standing and we can keep going. So that's why you got to work on building that critical mass. And it definitely does not happen in a one-off attempt.
This is great. So I'm trying to pull together like-minded questions so we can get through as many as possible. So one question from Donna Gunter. What is the conversation your children are having around race? Do they share similar stories that you experience? how does being biracial show up for them, and how do you feel about that? And that question is, I think, also related to another question that someone had about how has Avery's experience been at Duke?
Crystal, Marion is saying that this is going to end in less than a minute, so I just need to, it's going to automatically end. I wish I could answer this question. My children present very differently phenotypically. Avery looks more like her dad, who's white and Jewish. She gets mistaken for white. She hears what white people say when they don't realize they're talking near a person of color. My son presents as a light-skinned Black man. They're different kids. They present to the world differently. So I've had to really raise them differently to prepare them to be safe and strong out in the world. It looks like we haven't automatically ended, so who knows what's going to happen. But I just wanted to try to get to that answer quickly.
Yeah, no, I think you got to that. I think we're out of time, unfortunately. I just want to thank you so much, Julie. This was amazing. So everyone knows that this recording, you'll be able to see it. It's going to be on Duke Alumni's Lifelong Learning YouTube page. So folks will be able to rewatch this in the future. And thank you all for joining. I just want to thank everyone before we get cut off.
And I would love to share my screen in case you'd like to stay connected. Here's how you can stay connected to me. This is my website and my social media handles: Julie Lythcott-Haims, no hyphen, Facebook, J. Lythcott-Haims, Twitter, Instagram. And then this is the title of my next book, Your Turn, How to Be an Adult. You can screenshot this. I think they're also going to send it out. It's been in the chat. You'll get an email. I'd love for you to stay connected. Happy to engage on social media. And my next book is for young adults on adulting, on that magical, mysterious time of life after childhood, before death. And that'll be out 6 months from today. Crystal, thank you so much for a great conversation.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.